Today is May 15th, 2015. This interview with Cornelius Jonker of Grand Rapids, Michigan is being conducted by Deb Moore of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Well, thanks for meeting with me today, Corny. Why don't you start out by telling me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, a little bit about your family.
I was born in Rusk, Michigan, which is not too far from Allendale. So I'm a Michigander all my life. My father was a pastor of a church in a farming community there. We moved to Grand Rapids when I was still very young, and I grew up in the southeast section of Grand Rapids and attended my schools there. I grew up with values to obey authority and do my best. That was impressed upon me always by my father. I recall when I would get a report card from my school, he would sit with me, and at that time he called me Sonny. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Sonny, I'm going over these marks with you. And he says, I can understand if you don't get good or perfect marks in some of the subjects. But he said, there are two categories which I insist that you have a check mark for satisfactory or an A. And those two are conduct or deportment and effort." So I like to think that those values have been instilled in me. I don't intend to glamorize this, but I do believe that it is a good thing to live by.
Uh-huh. And so you respected your dad, and you always wanted to live up to what he expected of you?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So...
But there were other children in your family?
I was the second of four children.
Okay.
I had an older sister, 3 years older. I had a younger sister, 3 years younger. And then my mother was about 45 when she gave birth to a brother, James. He was a very brilliant, I would say, young man, organist, poet, teacher, who was going to go into the ministry. But when he was 22 years old, he and his buddy were going to Pennsylvania on a Christmas break. His buddy was driving throughout the night and rammed into the back of a steel truck. My brother was killed. Very sad.
Ah.
Otherwise, my younger sister is still living.
Okay. So that really changed things in your family?
It did. Yeah. My father died fairly young at 61. He was a heavy smoker. Because of that, I thought I will not smoke.
Okay.
So.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, what street did you grow up in? What street did you live on in Grand Rapids?
My first recollection was on Dunham Street.
Oh, yeah.
That is in the southeast.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked to school. We lost that house in the Depression. Then we moved to Alto Avenue near Fisk, and I attended Oakdale School. And we rented, but despite the fact that my father said he would never buy another house, he did buy one on Warden Street, which is near Franklin and Eastern. Mm-hmm. And my teen years were there, and that's where I was drafted into the Army when we lived on Warden Street.
Okay, you were going to high school? Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Grand Rapids Christian High in Madison and Franklin.
Okay, and completed? You graduated?
I graduated from the 12th grade.
In 1940?
Must have been around 1940, 41, 42.
42, okay. And so you graduated from high school in 42. Then you said you were drafted? Or you enlisted?
No, I was drafted. I had a letter from the Army, of course, and I had a report to Kalamazoo, Michigan on March 18, 1943.
Okay.
And there were physicals, and I passed. We could have a choice of either Army or Navy. I chose Navy, but one of the requirements was a color test. Why, I don't know.
A cutter test?
Color.
Oh, color test.
They gave me a sheet with all colored dots,
Okay.
supposedly, and I had to tell what was on there. For the life of me, I could not find anything but dots, so I could not go into the Navy, so it was the Army.
You did not know you were colorblind?
Well, I had always had a little problem with it, but it really came to the fore there.
Uh-huh.
So, and I know too now that I have trouble with colors,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
nothing that stops me from
Functioning.
functioning, right.
Okay. So they drafted you into the Army.
So I was sworn in, raised my hand, and I had 1 week to go home before I was to leave.
Okay.
Then 1 week later, on March 25, which was exactly my 18th and a half date birthday, my folks brought me to the train station in Grand Rapids, and I had a buddy, a school buddy, there too, so we were together, and we boarded the train and left the station, and we were told, to the processing center at Camp Grant, Illinois.
Okay.
And we were sheltered boys, Maynard and I, and we pulled out of the station, and some of the soldiers right away got on the floor and rolling dice and throwing money there. I said, Maynard, what are we getting into? But anyway, that was the start of the Army.
Okay, so did you feel, was it helpful to have a buddy to go with?
It was.
Yeah, yeah.
It was. But we got to the processing center and we took our own tests, and there was different types of, there was, first place, you got all Army uniform. You got shots. And then there was a variety of tests. I volunteered for a typing test, which I passed with pretty good colors. And I was classified as a 405 clerk typist, thankfully. I do not know about my buddy, but he was transferred, I know, to the Signal Corps. I was transferred to the infantry. And when I heard infantry, I thought, oh no, that's front line trenches. But anyway, but the good part was that because I was classified clerk typist, I was assigned to service company of the infantry. It was the company that served the regiment with mechanics, drivers, supply men, ones with just a little extra, what shall I say, qualifications. So we took the train to Camp Butner, North Carolina.
Okay.
And there was a couple of corporals driving a couple of the big Army 2.5-ton trucks with the canvas backs and the seats along the side and the back, and benches. We climbed in there and off to camp.
And that was your basic training?
That was the basic training.
Okay.
So we went to service company. However, service company did not have facilities for basic training. So every raw recruit that came to service company, maybe there was 4 or 5 that had to go to L company, some to M company, some to K company for basic training.
Okay.
I was assigned to K company for basic training. It was a 6-week project. Well, I was under a sergeant, Sergeant Meadows, who was not too happy that he had to train some other men that will not follow him into battle. But that's the way it had to be. That was quite grueling. But
Was it?
yes, it was running and hiking and shooting and
But at this time, you're 18, 18 and a half,
I was 18.
and you were in pretty good shape.
I was.
Yeah, but it was still difficult.
Right, it
Yeah.
was, but no, nothing extraordinary, but it was rough.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the, what they call it, some kind of a widow's course. Anyway, you had to crawl under live machine gun fire.
Oh,
And once in a while, a explosive next to you. So it was quite a thing. Anyway, we had the choice of service company if we wanted to take a 2-week driver's training course in the middle of basic training. Well, naturally, we opted for that. And after 2 weeks of driver's training, I received a license up to a 2.5-ton truck.
okay.
Then back to basic training for the remainder of it. When I was done, then I became an assistant truck driver.
Okay.
And the assistant truck driver did all the work. The driver stayed behind the wheel. And so it was all right, but it was a little bit one-sided, I thought. Well, one day I was in my barracks on sick call, or maybe I was recovering from a toenail operation. I had an ingrown toenail infected, and which I don't even want to talk about it, but they pulled out.
Oh,
It was awful. I was recuperating on my bunk, and before that, of course, when I probably should say this, when I first got into the Army, a raw recruit, could see nothing. I could not see the end of the war. I had a grueling day on KP. I felt sorry for myself. I thought, what is happening? Finally, I thought, this isn't good. You have to take a hold of yourself. So I got up, I went to the PX and bought some ice cream and decided I have to make the best of it. That was a bit of a turning point.
it sounds like it.
But anyway, when I was coming back to when I was sitting on my cot, I looked up and there came a tall fellow walking down the aisle. And he said, "Are you Private Jonker?" I said, "I am." He said, "I'm Corporal Sims. I'm company clerk." Oh, well, he said, "We are having a little change in personnel department, and we are getting assistant company clerks. Would you be interested? I noticed you're a clerk typist." I said, "I would be." So I became assistant company clerk under Corporal Sims. He was a gentleman from Kentucky. And our friendship lasted long after we were out of the Army. But anyway,
So that was a break. That was another
was.
turning point,
It
right?
was. I appreciated that. And there were maybe 20 of us in that personnel office. We had manual typewriters and field desks. We would type roster after roster, and we'd make payrolls and do correspondence, and just somehow it kept busy. You get to know the history of the men. I typed so many rosters that I knew practically all the men's serial numbers, because the first digits were designated where they lived, where they came from.
Okay.
So you knew that. Anyway, it wasn't too long after, then they made Corporal Sims head of the payroll department, because it was quite a job. And I became company clerk. Well, then I became a technician 5th class, corporal.
Okay. Because he wanted you with him.
Right. So we were in the same room, but I was company clerk. Then he was regimental payroll clerk.
Okay.
Well, then it came time for our division to think about going overseas.
Okay.
But back to the TO, which is the Table of Organization, every every position had to be filled according to that, and there was no payroll clerk.
Okay.
So Sims had to go back to company clerk. Well, that left me without a job. But in the company headquarters, the orderly room, there was a mail clerk. And he was an older man, not able to go overseas. They offered me that job because it was the same rating. Well, I thought then I could keep my rating and I could go overseas with my company. That was a godsend. So I became company mail clerk, but I was right under the heels of the first sergeant, and he was the boss of the company, you might say, under the captain. Captain headed office. He was in the orderly room, and he was a little Italian from the Bronx. I have nothing against him, but he was quite a fiery little man. And he would say, Corporal Jonker, type the menu for today. Corporal Jonker, type my morning report. Corporal Jonker, make the guard roster and put yourself on it. It was pretty much a lot of his work, plus my mail duties. Well, my mail duties didn't take up that much, but I had to go to the post office, I'd distribute the mail and stuff like that. And we had mail call, and some of the men, when they didn't get mail, they'd almost blame me, I felt sorry for them. I hardly dared say no. But anyway, because I was doing so much work for that first sergeant, once a Captain Flynn, the regimental motor officer, was in the office. I said, Captain Flynn, I said, just want to tell you that I have a truck license up to a 2.5 ton. Oh, he said, okay. I don't know just how long after that it was, but I was called to the first sergeant's office, and he said, Corporal Jonker, he said, what is this? He said, did you say something about driving a truck? Well, I said, I may have mentioned something to Captain Flynn. He said, there are 2 men here from 2nd Battalion with PFC Underwood's truck. PFC Underwood was doing something and he's in the hospital. He was playing and hit a mine or something. You have to get on that truck and you're going to be a truck driver. Packed my bags into that truck with 2 men I didn't know, hadn't driven a truck for I don't know how long, off to the ammunition dump. So that was quite a change. On the Autobahn to the ammunition dump, they knew where it was. So we got to it finally, loaded up with ammunition. It was on the median, actually, of the Autobahn. It was a wide spot. And then returned to 2nd Battalion. However, it was getting dark by that time. And you couldn't have lights, all little cat eyes just. And you almost had to drive by looking up at these tree-lined roads rather than looking straight ahead into the darkness.
Right.
But we eventually made it to 2nd Battalion.
Okay.
And then my life was quite a little different than under the first sergeant. It was closer to the front. We'd hear the machine guns, more shooting, but it was, in a way, it was, I liked it.
So you were in Germany by this time?
Oh, yes.
What part of Germany?
Well, it was the, what shall I say, the entrance between Belgium and Germany, just into Germany.
Okay, okay.
And there was a lot of bombed out little towns. Simmerath, Kesternick, I remember, Lammersdorf.
Because the Army had come over, the Air Force, Air Corps had come over.
They were ahead of us.
They were ahead of you.
Yeah, the Jeeps and the foot soldiers were ahead of us.
Okay.
And then came my truck and the rear echelon, but all the foot soldiers and the Jeeps and the mortar people were ahead of us.
They're all ahead.
But they would come to my truck to get the mortars, to get the ammos, stuff like that.
Okay.
And I remember, I don't know if you want some extraordinary experience, but
Oh, yes.
we, I don't intend to glamorize it because I was in the back echelon. And
I mean, so you felt like you were a little bit safe, but you still were in a war.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But overhead, periodically would go one of the buzz bombs, and they're called a robot bomb, and they would fly not very high up. You could see them very plainly, and they would sputter. They would you could see flame out of the back, and they were unmanned, of course. And as long as they sputtered, kept going, fine. But if they started to miss and stop, that meant they were coming down and explode. And then you had to scramble to try to find a place away. And besides, at nighttime, that was in Belgium and in early Germany, we would have what we called bed check Charlie come over at night. That would be a German plane in the dark, and he would drop indiscriminately anti-personnel bombs.
Oh, boy.
And that was a type of a bomb that when it hit the ground, it would spread shrapnel about waist high, which was devastating to any personnel near it.
Right.
But thankfully none landed near me, but we could hear bed check Charlie at night.
Right. So that was just random. I mean,
That
there's
was
nothing you
random.
could do to
No.
defend yourself against that.
But then then we had a call of anybody that could drive and would volunteer. There was some jeeps that were abandoned by their drivers. The drivers were either wounded or killed, and they were in the little town of Simmerath. I don't know just how many jeeps there were, maybe a half a dozen, but they wanted to retrieve those because the Germans had zeroed in on that town all around there with their 88s. 88s is our long-range cannon.
Okay.
And they wanted drivers to volunteer to drive the jeeps out of Simmerath back to the safety. And they would have a couple of mechanics that would scout the jeeps and bring them to a certain. So they drove us. So I volunteered. We got in the back of a truck, one truck, and maybe there was half a dozen of us. We drove to Simmerath, got out of the truck. We were going to head to the basement of a bad house, and there was a shell or a bomb that you could hear it, boom, and I had shrapnel land in the mud near my feet, and it would sizzle. It was so hot. So that was pretty close. But anyway, we got to the basement of that house, and then one by one, as they got the jeeps, we would have a driver, and he would take off. It was kind of open country, and they said to us, now there's a certain, you have to go down that road back to the camp, but when you get to that one corner, the Germans have that zeroed in, so that they could almost spot from observation if a vehicle was going to be there at a certain time. They would shoot. So they said, vary your speed. Go real fast and then maybe slow, or go slow and then speed up. So we just didn't know what to expect. But anyway, that was quite a little taste of some
And that
excitement.
strategy worked.
It worked. We got the jeeps back. They weren't in the best shape, but we did retrieve them. So it wasn't anything real heroic, but it was
Sounds
exciting.
like it to me, yeah. Right. So let's go back just a little bit. On what date did you, or what month did you ship out? You went from North Carolina to Belgium on a ship?
We,
Yeah, you got that in your notes?
I do have some of this.
Okay. I mean, you were in basic for 6 weeks,
6 weeks.
and then you
Then I
went.
was a truck driver, and then I was Then I was a mail clerk.
Right.
Then I reverted.
Still in the States.
Still in the States.
Uh-huh.
Well, we left October 5 to go to Camp Kilmer,
1943.
1943.
Okay. To go to camp.
Right. And that was Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. That was a port of embarkation.
Okay. Okay.
And we pulled out after dark on Friday the 13th.
Okay.
And we boarded a Navy transport, the General Squire.
Okay.
It was a Kaiser-built troop transport, nothing fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And we slept down in the hold I don't know if you know what these canvas cots are, in layers.
Like triple bunks?
Triple or quadruple.
Really?
And if you moved your
Knee.
knees up, you would hit the person above you. So, you know.
Because they're swaying into. Yeah.
But we survived. The galley where we had 2 meals a day. It was an evil-smelling place where they cooked. So I took my rations out on the deck, if at all possible, fresh air. And some men were very, very seasick.
Were they?
I did not succumb to seasickness, thankfully, but we had about 20 ships in the convoy,
Okay.
and it was quite an interesting
How
trip.
long did it take?
That's a good, okay, we arrived on October 25, so it was a
Okay.
long trip.
12 days.
October 5, no, wait, no, we
13th.
pulled out on the 13th, and we landed on the Plymouth, England on the 25th.
25th. Okay. And so what was interesting you said about the trip over? I mean, was there anything to do? Was it, you played cards?
Really,
or-
the ship had a tendency to roll from side to side, and I don't know why, but we would watch the other transports, and the destroyers would be on the outskirts. They were fast, and they were our protectors, and we made the trip safely. There were reports of subsidings, but nothing materialized. And what I did when I just before I left the States, I bought a pipe and a can of Prince Albert tobacco,
Okay.
and so I smoked the pipe on the deck. that was my introduction to smoking.
But you had already vowed never to smoke.
Well, not then,
Oh.
not yet.
Okay.
But then I graduated to cigarettes, which were a nickel a pack in the Army, and I would smoke them. But toward the end of my Army stay, I was starting to get a cough, and I love to sing. I thought, it's not doing my voice any good, I'm gonna quit. So I quit cold turkey before I got home. I never touched it again. And I'm glad I didn't.
Right.
But that's what I would do. I would sit on the deck, smoke my pipe, and watch the ships.
Okay.
There was not much else to do.
Were you nervous?
Not really.
No.
Not
I mean,
really.
still there was the unknown. You didn't really know what was going to
No,
happen once you landed.
We didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't know what you were getting into.
No. Did your religious faith help you
Yes.
along in that
Oh,
regard?
yes, it did. I was brought up in a Christian home. I had Christian education, and I had Christian values then, and I still do, which I appreciated. And I think in that way it helped me. And so, yeah, I was never, what shall I say, despaired or feared for my life, even though there were some dangerous situations. Anyway, we landed at Plymouth, England, and we took a train to Bournemouth. And we were there for, I don't know just how many days, but maybe a couple weeks or so. And then to cross the English Channel, we boarded an English ship called the Langeby Castle. And the crossing of the English Channel was rough. That's the only time I almost succumbed to seasickness. Or maybe it was the mutton diet that we ate, which wasn't,
You were used to.
wasn't too palatable. And we landed anyway at Le Havre, France, and there we saw rubble, and there you could see really the effects of the war.
Okay. Okay.
And
Because the Germans had bombed.
oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes, yeah,
And from there, you got on another train?
right. And then we went into, you know what 40 and 8s are?
No.
They are box cars.
Oh.
40 men or 8 horses, and they had straw in them, and we could sit or lie on the straw, and it wasn't so bad, but it was a boxcar travel.
Right, right.
No seats.
Yeah, not
And
comfortable.
that took us across France to Belgium near Germany, and rain, mud. I never saw so much mud, I don't believe, in all my life. But we got toward the border of Germany and Belgium, and then we would sleep in Belgian barns, and the farmers were very accommodating.
But still, it was November by now. Is it cold?
Quite cold,
But you could cover up in their straw in their barns.
right? But we had sleeping bags with us.
Okay.
We'd do that. You know,
But the Belgians were nice to you.
they were.
Yeah.
They were very friendly.
Probably glad to see you.
Right,
Yeah.
and
Okay. From then, and then you went on to where you were telling me about that name of the town with the S. What happened there? I can't remember the name of the town. Schlicken, whatever that was. You said it was the entry into Germany, and that's when you volunteered for the truck
Oh.
work.
I don't. Oh, Simmerath, you mean?
Simmerath, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
That was.
Th-
I probably spoke a little bit ahead.
No,
of
that's
that.
fine. That's fine.
But Simmerath was in Germany, not too far from Belgium, but it was a small town, but it was just all rubble.
Yeah.
Houses were half
Up and down.
destroyed.
Yeah, right.
And we utilized the basements if we had to go, and so did the troops.
Because the town was deserted.
Right. There was no personnel
Yeah,
in it.
yeah. So after Simmerath, where did you go?
No. Then we just moved as the troops moved through Germany. There was a big dam on the Rhine River called the Schwammenauel Dam, which was quite a formidable thing to cross or to capture, which our division did eventually capture, and it was quite a thing for the Allies to get. And then, plus, we also captured the Ludendorff Railroad Bridge at Remagen, Germany. That was a bridge across the Rhine. I have pictures of it. And the Germans tried to destroy that bridge by various means so that the Allies couldn't get across the Rhine, because that was quite a barrier.
Was
for the
it quite a
troops.
wide river?
It was a big river. And so what they did, they put planks and stuff alongside the railroad tracks, and got vehicles and men across. But we were camped on this side yet of it, and at night especially, the Germans would come and try to bomb it, and the Allies would reply with anti-aircraft. It was just like a 4th of July fireworks with the anti-aircraft guns shooting, making patterns in the sky. But eventually they managed to bomb that bridge and it broke. But by that time we did have a spearhead across the Rhine. But then the engineers made what they called pontoon bridge. And I drove across that. It was a little bit rocky, but I guess it was safe enough.
Were you the first one over?
I won't say that, but I was one of the early trucks over it, yes. So that was quite a turning point in the war.
Were you, all this time, did you feel reliable information about the progress of the war? Or did they keep you apprised of what was going on?
Not really, I don't think. We weren't, of course, in the front lines, and we weren't in the command post, but, so we just followed orders and kept forging ahead, forging ahead.
Yep, so you went over the Rhine.
Went over the Rhine. Yep.
Then what happened?
Well, so short, it wasn't too long after that, then the war ended.
Oh.
Because, the war ended in April, but there was a lot of fighting. And I remember one incident across the Rhine. I was in part of a maybe 2 or 3 truck convoy delivering something, and we had stopped for maybe eat our rations, and it was midday, and it was kind of an open area. We stopped by some trees. Anyway, all of a sudden, we heard somebody yelling, and then we saw a soldier running rather brokenly, staggering our way, and talking a bit incoherently. And he was pointing back, and he was saying, "Accident, explosion, comrades." So we thought, what happened?
Was he American?
He was a GI.
Okay.
American.
Okay.
So we piled into one truck, some of us that were there, took him, and we came upon a scene where he was coming from. And we came upon a Jeep. And that Jeep must have turned off the main little roads into a tree-lined road, and there were two GIs bringing to the rear 3 German prisoners in a Jeep.
Okay.
Well, the driver, of course, was behind the wheel, and they had put 2 prisoners on the front front fenders. They're flat.
Right.
And they had a German soldier and an American soldier in the rear of the Jeep. Well, then when they got on that little tree-lined road, the Germans had mined it. A mine is an explosive device just under the surface. And they must have hit it with both front wheels. And we came upon a scene of devastation. The Jeep was there, but the front part of the Jeep was blown off. The driver was still behind the wheel, injured. It was hard to believe unless you saw it. The motor of the Jeep was maybe 15 feet on the ground. It was blown right out. There were no more fenders. One dead German was lying face down, maybe 20 feet on the ground. And there was a German, one of the German prisoners that was in the back seat. He was kind of walking around dazedly. And the driver, who was wounded in his feet especially, he was just muttering, and he was calling for his mother, actually.
Yeah.
Hard to believe, but anyway, this other German prisoner that was walking around, he didn't seem to be injured, but dazed. He was saying, "Comrade, comrade, comrade."
Mm-hmm.
We thought, well, he's looking for a buddy.
Right.
And about that time, I either felt or heard a drop, and I looked up, and it's hard to believe, but you'd have to see it to believe it. It was tree lined. It was a kind of a thick tree. One of the Germans was blown into that tree and hung there. He was dead, of course. And when that other German saw that, oh, it went like that. They must have been buddies or something.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
So that was kind of a gruesome experience.
Right.
That
So it was the American that was keeping a gun or keeping an eye on the three prisoners who you saw first
Right.
in the field or
Right.
down the road.
Yeah.
Oh,
He was the
my.
one. He was not injured, but
Yeah.
he was shaken up.
Yeah.
So that he was armed, and
Right.
they were taking the three prisoners to the
Right.
rear.
So then you had two prisoners. Did you help secure them?
We only had one because two of them were
Oh,
killed.
two of them were dead.
Yeah, one was in the ground, one was in the tree.
Oh, I thought
No.
the one on the ground was just wounded. Okay.
Oh, he was dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had one prisoner
Yeah.
and
Oh, we did. We radioed for help.
yeah,
And,
boy, that was a sight.
And then some medical personnel came,
Wow.
and we went back. But it was
Yeah.
quite a scene to come up on.
Right. But it took a long time to get that out of your head.
I know it.
Oh,
But other than that, I mean, once in a while we'd see dead bodies, and I would be used to transport Americans' dead bodies
oh,
with my truck too.
okay. Yeah,
Not
I bet.
often, but occasionally. And I remember one for sure. We had a couple of Army medics that would stay at our barracks, sometimes in the States, and one of them was it was a medic that was killed,
Oh,
and I recognized him when I put him in. I felt bad.
yeah. Yeah, that was hard.
But, so then the war ended,
Mm-hmm.
and we.
Did you celebrate?
Well, I don't think we had the means or something to do it with. I don't know.
No party
But I
supplies?
think it was quite a relief.
Uh-huh.
Then we were quartered at Wolfhagen, Germany, at Bad Wildungen. Now, Bad means bath. And in this complex were hot baths. And the Frauleins would get the baths for the people, and it was like a spa or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was quite a nice place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our headquarters. And once in a while, we would, on Saturdays or something, we would go hunting wild boar or deer. We would get a outdoorsman, a German, and he would take us to a forest. And then we had a company of German prisoners by us to do menial work and so. And they liked it by us. And this outdoorsman would take these prisoners at a certain spot and drive toward us. And we would sit, and if the deer would come by us, then we'd get the deer.
Uh-huh.
And then they would use the meat for their rations,
Oh, okay.
for boars and deers. I got pictures of those too.
Okay.
So that was quite nice. And during that time, then I was chosen to go to Maastricht, Holland,
Okay.
on temporary duty for 6 weeks. This was probably around August
Okay.
of 45.
45. Okay.
And then I was stationed with maybe 3 or 4 other men from different parts of the regiment with their trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Our job was to, maybe 3-4 times a week, go to the train station, pick up a number of soldiers for rest and relaxation, bring them to Maastricht overnight, and then the next day we'd take them either to Brussels, Belgium for a few days, or to Valkenburg, Holland, both kind of resort places.
Oh, that was nice.
And then we would take back a contingent that was
Yeah.
there. So we were shuttling them, and it was a nice thing. And a little odd note, when I was called to go to Maastricht for 6 weeks, some of the drivers said to the motor sergeant, "Why did you pick Jonker?" He said, "Why did I pick Jonker?" He says, "Look at your truck." He says, "Then look at Jonker's truck." And he says, "You wonder why I picked Jonker?" I tried to keep my truck cleaned as much as I could, not extra, but I tried to keep it neat and clean. Well, anyway, so I was chosen. So it was nice. And during that time, then they dropped the atomic bomb in Japan, because our unit was scheduled to go over. So that was
a
good,
blessing.
good news.
Yeah.
And then we came back from Maastricht, and the motor sergeant had enough points at that time to be transferred to a place in France waiting for it to go home.
Okay.
And then I became motor sergeant. Well, that didn't sit too well with some of the truck drivers, because even when I landed first in Camp Butner as a raw rookie, 2 corporal truck drivers transported me and others to the camp. Well, they were still corporals, and I was over them, and I was just a young kid, and they let me know it. And so I pulled them in my little office, and I said to them, "Corporal Brandt, Corporal Halliworth, I can understand how you feel." So I probably would feel that way, but I said, I didn't buck for this job, but I said, that's the way it is. I said, we have to get along. I said, I'll try to be fair. He says, if I'm not, tell me. And that, I think that cleared the air a lot.
Did it?
But
Good for
it
you.
was a little something that
Yeah.
they resented, and I guess I could see that.
But it was good that you confronted him on it.
Right.
And, like you said,
So-
get in the open.
So after that we were occupied Berlin, and I wasn't there very long, but just enough to see a lot of the rubble and some of the things in Berlin. And then I had enough points, and I was transferred to what they called the cigarette camps. They were named after cigarettes. It was we were to Chesterfield. It was in France, near Karlsruhe, awaiting the time when
Transport home.
Transport home.
Yeah.
And we left, and I remember standing on the deck of that ship. Couldn't wait to see water between the ship and the dock, to know that we were actually leaving. Leaving. So I was trying to think of the name of the ship that we were on, but it was the same ship that President Wilson sailed on to the Treaty of Versailles
Oh, okay.
of World War I. It was
Yeah.
an old one,
Yeah.
but it was a passenger ship.
And it worked.
But we had a very rough crossing. This was in January of 46. And that ship
That's okay.
went up and down. We'd get on the fantail, and just like a roller coaster ride.
Oh,
So it
was rough.
we landed in New York, and we one of the first things we did was find a restaurant to get a steak dinner. We really wanted a steak dinner. So I was with maybe 2 or 3 Army buddies, and we found a restaurant, and we had a steak dinner, and we waited for the check, and the waitress says, that couple there picked it up.
Nice.
So we went to that couple, and we said that you don't have to do that. Oh, we want to do that for what you did.
That's
So that
so
was
nice.
And then boarded a train to Camp Atterbury, Indiana,
Okay.
which was a separation place where we received our honorable discharge papers,
Okay.
and then we went home.
Yeah. You'd been gone for 2 years and 10 months,
I was gone for 34 months.
34 months.
Yeah.
And in that time, Corny, I think you probably got to see a little bit of France at the end while you were waiting. Did you? I mean, did you get any furlough time or liberty time at all in Europe? All those months?
I can't recall a lot of furlough time there. I did have, due to my, and the States, because I was company clerk, I could maybe work things a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't have a lot of extra outings, shall I say,
Yeah.
in France.
Okay. Okay.
My duties just kept me busy.
So what you saw of Europe, you saw in the line of duty.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Later on, of course, I went to France. I said I went there as a gentleman or something.
Yeah.
You might-
Years
gentleman
later.
leisure. But no, in the Army, I didn't do a lot of extra sightseeing.
Okay. Okay. But you did get that. You did get to come home when you had the toe infection.
No.
No.
No, I just bore that in the Army, but I remember I was maybe in my barracks for a couple of days,
Yeah.
and that was a painful experience. I had a big heavy sergeant sit on my leg while they're supposed to deaden it, but it really didn't deaden it much.
Sounds like Civil War tactics. So the reason you had the ingrown toenail that became infected was because of the boots or the army or you're marching or what
I
happened?
even had that a little bit before
Did
I
you?
came
Okay.
into the Army, a tendency to have ingrown toenail. But
Okay.
in the Army, it became infected.
Yeah.
So that I could really not walk on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they saw it, that Army doctor says it's got to come out.
Yeah.
Well, when I came home out of the Army, it came, the nail grew right back
Oh.
and infected.
Oh.
And I heard of another doctor who could cure him.
Yeah.
And what he did is he
Sliced it down.
cut down on both sides, took out the root,
Yeah.
so that I only have a nail growing in the
Yeah.
center
middle.
part,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that cured it.
Yeah. And did you get to go home before you were shipped overseas?
Oh yes,
Yes.
when I was in Camp Butner and Camp Pickett, Virginia, we even went on maneuvers too when I was in Virginia, or Camp Butner, I forget which. 70 years ago, the memory is.
You're doing awful good. So anyway, you did get to come home and see your family again.
I did.
Okay.
We had to wear a uniform all the time.
Oh, all the time.
So I did. I have several pictures of my family that I was very thankful to come home.
I know it. I know. Were they worried about you?
My mother thought she'd never see me again. Somehow she thought that going off to war like that, there's not much chance of my coming home.
Right.
Well, I didn't know either, of course, what was in store for me. I didn't know whether I'd be in the front lines, but I think I'm certain that I was in the rear echelon. That was a blessing for me.
Sure.
Not that I'm afraid to go to the front lines, but by virtue of the fact that I did have that skill, I was back. It was a necessary part of Army, but it wasn't one of the heroic glamour bang bang type, shall I say.
So what kind of lasting effects do you think your military service had on you? How do you think it changed you or?
I can't say that it affected me so much, although I was offered just before I left, if I would enlist for, I don't know, 3 years, they would make me regimental motor officer. That would be a master sergeant rating, which was the highest non-commission. They offered that to me if I would re-enlist. I remember saying, not for 5 minutes. It isn't that I couldn't stand it, but I just wanted to come home
You had enough.
to my family and to my faith, and so that's what it was.
Uh-huh.
I did have that one low point. When I was at first a raw rookie, but I got over that. And,
Do you think it helped with your maturation, your growth?
I think so. I think by seeing what I did see, I think you come out of it. You either lose something or you gain something. And I would say I grew rather than lose. You know. And I think those values stood me in good stead throughout my life. I even had my own business and never got rich, but it was quite an experience.
What did you do?
For many years, I worked in a factory running automatic screw machines. And then my buddy and I found somebody who would underwrite us, and we started our own business in Hudsonville from scratch.
Okay.
And we grew to be quite a company.
And what did you produce? Screws?
Same things. Anything that can be made out of metal bars.
Okay.
We call it Topcraft Metal Products. It was automatic screw machines, and I was 47 when I started that,
Okay.
and I retired when I was 64, and the company they said, well, we'll pay you off for 15 years, so I could live handsomely for 15 years. I thought, by this time, I'll be 79.
Okay.
Oh, I'll never live that long. So I opted to retire. Well, that was probably 25 years ago. I'm still here.
Oh, boy. Let's see. Well, we got a lot of good information there. Did you take advantage of the GI Bill when you came home?
No.
No. Did you join any veterans groups?
Not really.
No. You just pretty much came home and moved on with your life.
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else we should say? We've just got a couple more minutes on the tape there.
No, I'm not ashamed of being a soldier, not at all. But
Well, you should be the opposite. You should be proud.
I am.
Yeah.
I am, and I have other interests too, and so thankfully I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, I would think though that being in the Army probably exposed you to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds that you might not have met otherwise.
It surely did. I have made good friends. I even made some, shall I say, enemies. I could tell you some funny tales, but I don't know if that would be so.
Probably not.
It would be so good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. That's wonderful. I think we got a lot of information there.